Listen close, friend, because once you hear the thunder of hooves and taste the grit of frontier dust, there's no turning back. She was the only survivor of a wagon raid. Every other soul left on that trail fell victim to a vicious ambush, their voices snuffed out by gunfire and desert wind. A grieving scout discovered her trembling in the wreckage, haunted by the violence she'd just witnessed. In the hush of that bloody sunrise, he made a choice that would test his every conviction. This is their story, a journey through betrayal, heartbreak and redemption, across the unforgiving plains of the Wild West. The wagon wheels still turned a little, spinning aimlessly, although the rest of the vehicle lay toppled on its side. The fire crackled, eating away at the canvas covering, and the dusty air clung to the acrid tang of gun smoke. Scattered along the sandy trail were figures wrapped in sorrowful stillness, their last moments captured in twisted postures. Not even the whisper of a breeze dared to break the hush that settled after the thunderous roar of gunshots had subsided. Isaiah Hardin, a seasoned scout who had seen more violence than most men could stomach, brought his horse to a slow halt. Carefully, he dismounted his limbs, aching from a previous skirmish that had left his shoulder in a perpetual throb. He was no stranger to death, but the sight before him forced a kind of reverence in his steps. He approached the nearest wagon. A second set of wagons, similarly obliterated, lay further along the trail, and glanced at the bullet-riddled boards, the spent shells scattered on the ground like fallen seeds of tragedy. As he passed one body, then another, each lifeless face seemed to call out for the living to bear witness. He pressed a trembling hand to his chest, remembering a day not too long ago when he'd lost his wife and baby boy in a raid near Fort Laramie. The memory tormented him every time he encountered fresh devastation in these lawless lands. Then he heard it, a sob so soft it could have been a dying breeze. But it was very much human. He bent down, dust swirling around his boots, and saw a girl. She was huddled behind a trunk that had splintered open, revealing carefully folded linens stained with blood. Her eyes wide and terrified locked onto his. She trembled violently, whether from shock or injury he could not immediately tell. Isaiah knelt next to her, removing his worn hat. He spoke in the calmest voice he could summon. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Isaiah Hardin. You're safe now." She offered no response, only tears. His heart twisted. He'd been too late to save everyone else, but he could save this girl. He didn't even know her name yet, but the weight of her survival pressed on him like a solemn vow. Minutes later, Isaiah made his way through the carnage, searching for supplies. He found a canteen half filled with tepid water and returned to the trembling girl. She sipped it gratefully, her trembling lips parted just enough to let the water pass. Then, in a voice so small, he had to lean in close to hear, she whispered, "Savannah," he blinked, "Savannah, is that your name?" She nodded, her eyes darting toward the lifeless forms that had once been her parents, and from the clothing, scattered among the wreckage, perhaps siblings or extended kin, it was an entire family devastated. In a single morning, Isaiah had seen what men on the frontier could do, and it lit a slow, burning fury in his gut. Once certain she could stand, Isaiah supported her with an arm around her shoulders. She was trembling so badly that she nearly collapsed into his side. He helped her to his horse, a sturdy bay mare named Sable. The mare seemed to understand the weight of grief in the air, and stood calmly, allowing Savannah to mount with surprising gentleness. Isaiah surveyed the scene one last time. Normally, a scout would keep moving and report such a tragedy to the nearest town or fort. But the notion of leaving the dead behind without dignity clawed at him. He decided to at least bury the bodies. He could. Savannah, still in shock, simply watched through sweat-soaked brow and searing pain in his wounded shoulder. Isaiah dug shallow graves until the sun beat down fiercely overhead. His mind wandered as he worked, drifting to memories of his own lost family. He had buried them too. No markers, no ceremony, just desert dust and heartbreak. When he was done, he helped Savannah say a short prayer. It was the least he could offer. He knew that, in the wide emptiness of the West, closure often came down to a few handfuls of dirt and quiet tears. As they prepared to leave, he looked into her eyes. "I'll look after you," he said, more certain of this promise than any other he had made since losing his wife and child. "I swear it." They rode in silence, under a sky that spanned from horizon to horizon in a cloudless expanse of cobalt. The road they followed was a rough trail once frequented by pioneers heading west, passing near real-life landmarks like Fort Laramie and the Oregon Trail. But nowadays the routes were dangerous. Bandits, deserters, and opportunists roamed with little fear of justice. The nearest semblance of civilization was the dusty town of Clay Gulch, known for its single dirt street lined with ramshackle buildings, and a saloon named the Desert Star Savannah, dozed intermittently held upright by Isaiah's firm grip and the slow sway of the horse. Her face, tear-streaked and pale, betrayed no emotion except exhaustion. A child forced to witness violence no human should endure. Isaiah kept scanning the ridges and gullies for any sign of the raiders who had caused such devastation. If they were still out there, they might not welcome witnesses. Upon reaching Clay Gulch, Isaiah guided Sable to the only hotel in town, an old wooden structure with peeling paint. The sign read, "Clay Gulch Boarding House." Though the letters were badly weathered, he helped Savannah down, cradling her gently. Mabel Sheehan, the plump, kind-hearted owner, gasped when she saw the girl's blood-stained dress. She ushered them into a quiet room on the ground floor. "Land sakes, Hardin," Mabel exclaimed. "What in creation's happened?" "A massacre," Isaiah replied gravely, mindful not to terrify Savannah further. "Found her near the wagons." No other survivors. Mabel pressed her hands to her apron. Good Lord, who would do such a thing? Isaiah shook his head. "I intend to find out." Mabel nodded, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You must be hungry. I'll fetch some broth once alone." Isaiah turned to Savannah. "Rest." "We're safe here." She stared at the single bed, uncertain. Isaiah gently guided her to it. She sat her body stiff, as though she might shatter with the slightest pressure. When Mabel returned with hot broth and some bread, Savannah ate in small, methodical bites. It wasn't until she finished that she finally met Isaiah's gaze. "Thank you," she managed her voice like a breeze over the desert. Her gratitude nearly broke him. Swallowing hard, he said, "I'm just doing what any decent man would." But inside, he knew that once upon a time he might have turned away, like so many did out here, telling himself it wasn't his business. His family's deaths had hardened him, but it had also carved out a raw empathy for the orphaned and the broken. Savannah was a living testament to a cruelty he had vowed to fight against. As Savannah finally slept, Isaiah wandered into the saloon, the Desert Star, to gather information. Dark wood tables filled the smoky interior, and the few patrons inside played cards or swirled whiskey in cheap tin cups. The bartender, a wiry man named Jed, nodded a greeting. "Whiskey, Isaiah." Isaiah slid onto a bar stool and exhaled. "Yeah, a stiff one." Jed poured him a shot. "You look like you've been through a storm." Isaiah downed the whiskey in one go. Seen any rough sorts come through lately, Jed? I stumbled on a wagon raid a few miles out of town. Jed paled, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. Heard some rumors. A band calling themselves the McCrae Posse has been working this territory. They usually move quick, hit a wagon train, then vanish. Isaiah's blood chilled. He'd heard of the McCrae Posse. Rumor had it they were a mix of ex-Confederate soldiers and outlaws who thrived on the chaos of the frontier. Their leader, Jeremiah McCrae, was said to be as ruthless as any gunslinger alive. Stories told of entire caravans being robbed and left in bloody heaps. Isaiah clenched his fist. Law in these parts. Don't do much. Jed added, quietly wiping the counter with a rag that only spread the dirt around Marshal Jenkins' tries, but he's only one man. Town can barely afford to feed him, let alone track down outlaws. Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. Well, maybe it's time someone else did something about it, Jed frowned. Hardin, you got a death wish. The McCrae Posse is known for their savage ways. Isaiah locked eyes with the bartender. They slaughtered a family. Only a young girl survived. I can't just let that stand. Jed sighed. Then I hope you've got more than a pistol at your side. Some good men have tried to take them on. Those men died or never came back. Taking his leave, Isaiah offered a curt nod. He left the saloon with a single-minded purpose. He'd find Jeremiah McCrae if it was the last thing he did. When Isaiah returned to the boarding house, he found Savannah awake, sitting at the small table. She looked at him with an intensity that made her appear older than her years. Your shoulder, she said softly, gesturing at the wound she noticed earlier. You're hurt. Isaiah flexed it, wincing. It's an old wound, never quite heals, right? He tried a smile, but it only half-formed. How are you holding up? She shrugged. I'm alive, I guess. It was such a painfully simple statement for a girl who'd lost her entire family hours ago. But what else could she say? Isaiah sat across from her, trying to find the right words. Savannah, do you remember anything about the men who attacked your wagon? Anything at all? She swallowed tears, threatening to spill again. They came at dawn. We heard hooves, shots. My father told us to hide behind the wagon, but they found us. Her voice broke. Killed my mother, father, everyone else. I was hit on the head. When I woke, they were gone. Isaiah leaned forward, voice gentle. I need to stop them from doing this to anyone else. Savannah, you don't have to come, but I must try. Her gaze flickered to the bandage peeking from under his shirt. You're wounded, though, and you're just one man. One man can do plenty when he's got nothing to lose. Isaiah replied, voice taut. Believe me, I know. She looked away, a lone tear sliding down her cheek. I don't want to be alone. It was the first time she'd truly admitted her fear. The West was harsh, especially for a lone girl with no surviving kin. If Isaiah left her, she would be alone in a world that had just proven its brutality. You won't be, Isaiah said, without hesitation. I'll make sure you're safe, whether you stay here or ride with me. Savannah pressed her lips together. She didn't relish the idea of staying behind in a strange town, nor did she appear eager to ride out after men who had butchered her family. But as the night deepened, Isaiah realized the choice might not be hers alone. The McCrae posse could have seen her face. If they discovered she was alive, and in Clay Gulch, it might only be a matter of time before they came to finish the job. The next morning, Isaiah woke at first light. He carefully stepped outside the boarding house, greeting the dusty sunrise. His thoughts drifted to the events that had forged him into the lone scout he was. Years ago, on the outskirts of Fort Laramie, he had guided a wagon train, the same wagon train carrying his wife and infant son. He'd assured them the route was safe. But it wasn't. A tribe defending its land had skirmished with the wagon train. In the chaos, his family was killed. Though the tribe was ultimately not to blame, Isaiah had harbored guilt for leading them there, for not foreseeing the confrontation, for failing in his promise to keep them safe. But that was the nature of the West. Misunderstandings could lead to bloodshed, and once it started, it rarely stopped. He replayed those memories again and again, searching for ways it might have been different. Now the only peace he found was in trying to save others from senseless tragedy. Savannah's plight felt like a second chance. He could protect her, as he had failed to protect his own. Perhaps in doing so, he might finally lay his ghosts to rest. He found Mabel in the hotel kitchen. "How's the girl?" she asked. She slept. Isaiah said, "She's got a long road ahead. The men who did this are still out there." Mabel's eyes flicked with anger. "You'll find them." He nodded. "I aim to try." After a simple breakfast, Isaiah gathered supplies, a coil of rope, a canteen, and his father's old Colt revolver, which had once been a prized possession. He wanted to be ready for the hunt. Savannah emerged from the room. Though she looked worn, she seemed steadier than the day before. "I want to come with you," she announced, voice trembling only a little. Isaiah frowned, surprised. "It's dangerous." She folded her arms in a stubborn stance. "I can't stay here waiting, wondering if those men will ride into town. I'd rather face what's out there than hide." Isaiah studied her for a long moment. The rational part of him wanted to refuse to keep her locked away from danger. But he knew the frontier offered little safety, even in the outskirts of civilization. If the McCrae posse wanted her dead, they could track her down anywhere. Besides, the girl had already witnessed a level of horror no child should ever see. He finally nodded. "All right, but you follow my lead. And if things get rough, you run. Understood." She swallowed, then nodded. "Yes, sir." The pair stepped outside to where Sable was tied. The morning sun glowed on the dusty main street of Clay Gulch. A couple of passing townsfolk looked at them with apprehension. Word of the Wagon massacre had already spread. Isaiah mounted first, then helped Savannah climb up behind him. Mabel waved from the hotel porch, tears in her eyes. "Godspeed," she said. Hooves kicked up a cloud of dust as they rode out of Clay Gulch. In the crisp morning air, Isaiah's heart felt heavier than the pack on his back. This was it. A vow to chase down the men who had brutally ended an entire family. He didn't know if he would survive, or if revenge would soothe the ache in Savannah's soul. But he knew with unshakable certainty that he had to try. They followed the rutted trail westward, the land stretching into rolling hills and sparse vegetation. Isaiah kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, but also scanned for tracks. The McCrae posse traveled in numbers 8 or 9 men. By most accounts, they'd leave a strong trail if they weren't overly cautious. As they rode, Isaiah occasionally glimpsed the old stage roads that once thrived when the Overland Stage Company still ran lines through the territory. Now he saw little more than worn wagon tracks, nearly swallowed by prairie grass. The air was cool in the early hours, but would soon simmer under the relentless sun. Savannah clutched his waist, quiet and resolute. They said little, but the silence between them was not awkward. It was the silence of two people who shared a profound loss, each dealing with grief in their own way. Around midday, Isaiah dismounted to check for hoof prints at a fork in the trail. He found fresh tracks, likely from 5 or 6 horses. "They split up," he muttered. Savannah still astride. Sable asked, "Which way then?" "Hard to say," he replied, running a calloused hand over the dusty ground. "Might be a decoy. We'll track the bigger group. Jeremiah McCrae rarely travels alone." They followed the heavier set of tracks, weaving through rocky passes where the land jutted into jagged stone. The day crept into afternoon, the sun a punishing orb overhead. Eventually they spotted a campsite nestled in a shallow ravine. The ashes of a fire pit were still warm. Someone had been here not more than a few hours ago. Isaiah studied the camp with narrowed eyes. Empty cans, footprints, and even a scrap of cloth pinned under a rock. He gently lifted it and recognized it as a piece from a Confederate uniform. A confirmation, if any were needed, that they were on the right trail. His heart pounded with anticipation and a measure of fear. He'd faced renegade outlaws before, but never ones rumored to be as vicious as the McCrae posse. Could he handle them alone, especially with Savannah, to protect Savannah? Watched him silently. He sensed her anxiety growing, but he also saw a flicker of determination. Her entire life had been uprooted by these men. She wanted justice or vengeance. Possibly both. They continued to track the outlaws throughout the afternoon. By late day, the trail led them to a stream where the hoofprints disappeared into the water. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in bands of crimson and gold. "We'll camp here," Isaiah decided. "Better to rest while we can." Isaiah set a small fire, mindful not to let it burn too bright. No sense advertising their location. Savannah sat across from him, arms wrapped around her knees. She stared at the flickering flames, the orange glow revealing her grim expression. "I keep seeing their faces," she whispered. "My mother, father, brothers. They died so quickly, and I just stood there." Isaiah lowered his gaze. He recognized the guilt, survivor's guilt. "You were in the middle of an ambush, Savannah. There was nothing you could have done." She bit her lip. Tears brimming. "My father. He shielded me, and I left him there." Her voice cracked, and for a long moment she wept quietly. Isaiah knew better than to interrupt. He'd cried more times than he could count when he lost his own family, often alone under the stars. He waited until her sobs subsided into ragged breathing. "Your father's last act was to save you," he said softly. "That means you have a chance to live the life he wanted for you. It's not your fault you survived. It's a blessing." She sniffed, brushing tears away. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like a blessing." Isaiah nodded, understanding all too well. Grief changes shape over time. It doesn't vanish, but you learn to carry it differently. They ate in silence, hardtack biscuits, dried jerky and sips of water. The night chill crept in, and Isaiah placed an extra blanket around Savannah's shoulders. He saw the faint smile she managed in gratitude. As the moon rose, Isaiah listened for any unusual sounds. The night was eerily quiet, except for the distant howl of a coyote. He figured they were still a few hours behind the posse. With luck, they might catch them at dawn, or at least catch up to them, before they reached more treacherous ground. Savannah dozed off, eventually succumbing to exhaustion. Isaiah tried to rest, but sleep eluded him. His mind wandered to a memory of his own wife, Sarah, singing softly to their baby boy under a star-filled sky, much like this one. That memory was the last time he'd truly felt peaceful, before an ambush took them away. He stifled the rising wave of sorrow. He was on a mission now to protect Savannah and bring down the men responsible for her family's murder. In that single-minded purpose, he found a flicker of hope perhaps even redemption. By the time they reached the next significant stop, a small settlement named Willow Creek. The sun was high and both were weary. Willow Creek was little more than a cluster of buildings near a shallow creek that gave the place its name. A blacksmith, a general store, and a saloon comprised the main drag. A handful of simple homes radiated outward from the center, each with chipped paint and dusty porches. Isaiah led Sable to a water trough, while Savannah walked beside him, her hand shielding her eyes from the sun. Few townsfolk roamed the street, but those who did regarded them with cautious interest. The blacksmith, a broad-shouldered man named Tobias, emerged from his shop. He recognized Isaiah from some months back, when Isaiah had come through, escorting a small band of travelers. Hardin Tobias greeted. "Heard you were around these parts." Isaiah nodded. "Need to ask if you've seen any strangers ride through recently. Dangerous men, maybe wearing bits of Confederate uniforms or sporting tattoos of a skull and snake." Tobias wiped sweat from his brow. "Might have some rough types rolled in 2 nights ago, looking for supplies. I tried to mind my business, but they gave me the chills, drank at the saloon, then rode off." Savannah's lips thinned at the confirmation. She glared at the horizon, as if she could see them. Isaiah pressed further. "You know where they were headed? West, maybe. Hard to say for sure." One of them asked if there was a path through Shadow Gorge. Isaiah glanced at Savannah. "Shadow Gorge is about a day's ride from here. If they went that way, they're either looking for a shortcut or a place to hide." Tobias shrugged. "Ain't much else out there. But bandit hideouts." Isaiah reached into his pocket and handed Tobias a coin. "Thanks." They made a quick stop at the general store for provisions, more water jerky, and a bit of feed for Sable. The store's owner, Mrs. Dunbar, asked them to be careful, her expression tinged with motherly concern when she caught sight of Savannah's distant, haunted look in a place where heartbreak was common. The sorrow in the girl's eyes was recognizable to all. Before leaving, Isaiah paused at the saloon. The sign overhead read, "Laurel's Respite," though it looked anything but restful. He pushed open the swinging doors. Inside, a heavy smell of stale beer clung to the air. A few haggard souls nursed their drinks. The bartender, a stocky woman named Laurel, looked up. "Something I can do for you?" she asked, voice tinged with an edge. "Name's Isaiah. Hardin. I'm a scout, tracking some men. Heard they came through." She folded her arms, unimpressed. "They came, spent money, and left." "I'm not in the habit of prying," Savannah stepped forward. "Those men murdered my family." Laurel's tough demeanor cracked for a second. She glanced at the men playing cards in the corner, then back at Isaiah and Savannah. "I'm sorry," she sighed. "They didn't talk much. But I overheard one mention Shadow Gorge. That's all I know." Isaiah nodded, dropping a coin on the bar as thanks. "Appreciate it." Laurel gave Savannah a sympathetic look. "I hope you find justice, child." With that, they left outside. The bright daylight stung their eyes after the dim saloon interior. "Shadow Gorge it is," Isaiah said quietly. Shadow Gorge was an ominous stretch of jagged ravines and rocky outcroppings that created a network of narrow passes. It had served as a hiding place for various criminals over the years, due to its treacherous paths and lack of law enforcement presence. If the McCrae posse was holed up there, they had every advantage. As they approached, the day's heat bore down on them. Savannah's face grew flushed, and Isaiah made sure she drank enough water. He scanned the ground, eyes narrowing whenever he spotted a fresh horseshoe imprint. The path wound deeper into the gorge, with walls of weathered rock towering on either side. The sun was beginning to sink, casting elongated shadows across the rugged terrain. Isaiah slowed Sable and dismounted, gesturing for Savannah to do the same. "We'll proceed on foot from here. Too easy to hear a horse coming," she nodded. "All right." They led the mare by the reins, carefully picking their way over loose stones. Isaiah kept his pistol at the ready. Every nerve on alert, Savannah, though clearly frightened, carried herself with a determined air. Eventually they found a narrow ledge overlooking a hollow. From this vantage point, they saw a small encampment, a couple of tents, a smouldering fire, and 8 horses tied to a makeshift corral. Isaiah's heart thundered. 8 horses. Possibly 8 men. "There they are," Savannah whispered, her breath catching in her throat. Isaiah placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's too dangerous to confront them all at once. Let's see if they split up or if we can pick them off one by one." She swallowed hard. "What if they leave? We track them, but I think they'll stay put for the night. They must feel safe here." They pulled back, behind the rocks, hearts hammering in unison. For a moment, they simply gazed at each other, sharing a silent understanding of the danger. This was no child's errand. They were about to take on a group of seasoned killers. That night, they found a small alcove near a stream that trickled through the gorge. After tethering Sable, Isaiah and Savannah ate a cold supper. Neither said much, but they knew tomorrow could be the day they either achieved justice or lost their lives. Grey light tinted the sky when Isaiah roused Savannah. She rubbed her eyes, moving stiffly. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a violent storm. They crept back to the overlook and saw the gang waking up. A few men left their tents, stretching and lighting a morning fire. One man with a face full of scars seemed to be giving orders. That had to be Jeremiah McCrae. Isaiah looked around. The terrain was rocky and steep, which could either be an advantage or a trap. The posse likely posted sentries. He scanned the ridges, spotting a lone figure perched with a rifle. Good thing they hadn't tried to sneak in blindly. They would have been spotted. "Stay here," he whispered to Savannah. "I'll circle around, see if there's a vantage point from the other side." She grabbed his hand, eyes wide. "Be careful." He squeezed her hand in reassurance and slipped away. He moved quietly, hugging the gorge walls, mindful of rolling any loose rocks. Upon reaching the far side, he found a spot where he could see directly into the camp. One of the posse members was rummaging through a crate of supplies. Another was swigging whiskey straight from the bottle. Suddenly a twig snapped behind Isaiah. He spun, gun raised, coming face to face with a posse member who had been scouting. The man's eyes widened, and he lunged. Gunfire erupted, a single shot, echoing like thunder in the confined space of the gorge. The bullet whizzed past Isaiah's ear. He fired back, hitting the man square in the chest. The outlaw crumpled with a pained grunt. Echoes of the shots reverberated off the canyon walls, unmistakably alerting the rest of the posse. "Damn it!" Isaiah cursed under his breath. From the camp below, shouts rang out as the men scrambled for their weapons. The sentry on the ridge peered toward Isaiah, rifle in hand. Isaiah ducked behind a boulder, bullets ricocheting off the rock face. He needed to get back to Savannah. She was alone. Isaiah sprinted along the ridge bullets, whistling past. When he reached the overlook, he found Savannah crouched behind a rock. Her eyes were wide, but she hadn't fled. A bullet pinged against the boulder near her, sending shards of stone flying. "We've lost the element of surprise," Isaiah said between breaths. "Stay low, we can't take them all head-on." She nodded, clinging to the rock. "You're bleeding." She pointed to his sleeve. He glanced down. A bullet must have grazed his arm. Blood seeped through the fabric, but the wound didn't feel deep. "I'm fine. We have to move. They scrambled along the ridge as the posse began climbing up the gorge. Walls, shouts echoing. Jeremiah McCrae's gruff voice boomed commands. Fan out and find them. No survivors. Isaiah fired a shot, forcing 2 outlaws to duck for cover. Another volley came back in return. The walls amplified the gunfire, making it hard to pinpoint exact positions. Dust filled the air, stinging their eyes. A bullet struck inches from Savannah's foot, and she stifled a scream. Isaiah grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a narrower path. If they could lure some of the gang into single file along a tight passage, they might even the odds. Sure enough, 2 outlaws gave chase, their footfalls crunching on loose rocks. Isaiah turned, fired twice. 1 outlaw stumbled, clutching his chest. The second dove behind a jagged spur of stone. They exchanged fire, the echo of gunshots crashing like thunder. Savannah cowered behind Isaiah, heart pounding. She wanted to help, but she only had a small pistol. Mabel had pressed into her hand before she left Clay Gulch. She didn't feel confident enough to shoot unless absolutely necessary. The standoff intensified. Jeremiah's voice rang out again, closer this time. Hardin. That I've heard about you. People say you're a damned fool meddling in others' affairs. Isaiah grimaced. You murdered a family. That's more than meddling. That's justice. Calling a barking laugh echoed. We done a lot more than that. Ain't no law out here. You should have stayed out of our way. Isaiah caught Savannah's eye. Her expression was one of horror. This was the man responsible for the nightmare that had stolen her family's life. Rage tightened Isaiah's grip on his revolver. From a higher vantage point, the sentry took aim. A shot rang out, hitting the stone near Isaiah's head. He pulled Savannah to cover his breath. Ragged! They were pinned! Another wave of bullets showered their position. In the chaos, Savannah saw one of the outlaws creeping behind a rocky protrusion to flank them. Isaiah was reloading, her heart hammered like a wild drum. But a sudden fierce determination coursed through her. She remembered how her father had told her to run, how he'd died protecting her. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a survivor. Clutching the small pistol Mabel had given her, she stood up from behind the rock. The outlaw was only a few feet away, his rifle raised to fire at Isaiah's exposed side. Savannah fired first, the recoil nearly knocking her down. The bullet struck the outlaw in the shoulder. He cried out, spinning around with wide, furious eyes. Isaiah jolted in surprise. The outlaw attempted to raise his rifle again, but Savannah fired a second shot. This time, the bullet found its mark, and the outlaw collapsed. Savannah's hands trembled, tears pricking her eyes, but she forced herself not to look away from what she'd done. Isaiah stared at the scene, stunned Savannah. He breathed, voice hoarse. She gulped, tears rolling down her cheeks. I had to. He was going to kill you. Isaiah didn't have time to offer comfort. More bullets zinged overhead. He pulled her back down. You saved my life. Stay low. Savannah nodded shakily, aware that she had just crossed an irreversible line. She'd taken a life, and the realization of it sent waves of nausea through her. Yet she steeled herself, focusing on the present danger instead of her guilt. The gunfight continued to rage. McCrae's men seemed endless, but in truth their numbers had dwindled. Isaiah and Savannah's desperate defense had taken out several. From behind a rocky barricade, Isaiah spotted Jeremiah McCrae himself, tall, broad face set in a sneer. He aimed at Isaiah, bullet chiseling the edge of the rock. Hardin, Jeremiah roared. You're a damn fool if you think you can get out of this alive. Isaiah didn't bother responding. Instead, he fired back, forcing Jeremiah to duck behind cover. A moment later, the outlaws paused their assault. It was an eerie lull, broken only by the ragged breathing of combatants echoing in the gorge. Isaiah used the moment to reload hands, shaking from adrenaline. Savannah did the same with her small pistol. I'm out," she whispered. "I only had 4 bullets." He nodded grimly, handing her a spare bullet from his belt. "Make it count." Suddenly, Jeremiah's voice rang out again. "Hardin, let's settle this face to face, you bastard. I don't know why you're sticking your neck out for that scrawny little girl, but you come on out now, or we'll burn you out." Isaiah clenched his jaw. He glanced at Savannah. "Stay here. If anything goes wrong, you run." She shook her head furiously. "I'm not leaving you." "Savannah," he said firmly. "This is my fight. I'm not letting him hurt you." Her eyes welled with tears, but she recognized the tone in his voice. Protective, final. She gave a trembling nod. Isaiah crouched, then eased out of cover, revolver in hand, searching for McCrae. This was madness, but maybe he could draw the man out and finish him. He spotted Jeremiah stepping into a clearing between jagged rocks. The outlaw leader had a revolver in one hand, a bowie knife in the other. His posse members lurked behind boulders, weapons trained on Isaiah. "Let the girl go." "McCrae." Isaiah growled. "She's just a kid." Jeremiah barked a laugh. "A kid who's cost me a few good men already. She's got teeth, ain't letting her walk away after what she's seen." He spat on the ground. "You want to protect her. You'll both die for that." Isaiah didn't wait for further theatrics. He leveled his gun and fired. Jeremiah twisted the bullet, grazing his arm. He snarled and fired back, the shot missing Isaiah by mere inches. Immediately, the other outlaws opened fire. Isaiah dove for cover, returning shots as dust and debris exploded around him. Savannah watched in horror. She saw an outlaw moving in from the side, intent on flanking Isaiah. With trembling resolve, she took aim, waiting for the perfect moment. The man stepped into the open. She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew wide, sparking off the rock. The outlaw turned, spotting her, and fired. She ducked. The bullet whizzed overhead, leaving her ears ringing. Isaiah took advantage of the distraction, firing at the man. His shot struck true, the outlaw collapsing to the ground. Jeremiah, enraged, bellowed orders for the remaining men to close in. In the midst of the chaos, an echoing crack boomed through the canyon. It sounded like a landslide. For a brief moment, everyone paused, scanning the cliffs. A sudden quake rattled the ground as chunks of rock began to tumble from the upper ledges. The gunfire must have dislodged something weakening the already precarious cliff face. "Rock slide," someone yelled. Boulders and smaller rocks thundered down, crashing into the gorge floor. The outlaws scattered in panic, some diving out of the way. Too slowly, one man was buried beneath falling stone, his screams abruptly silenced. Another barely darted aside, only to be struck by a smaller rock that sent him reeling. Isaiah and Savannah pressed themselves against the cliff wall, shielding their heads. Dust choked the air, reducing visibility to a hazy blur. The stench of gunpowder and fear mingled with the raw scent of freshly churned earth. When the landslide subsided, the gorge was a scene of destruction. Boulders formed new barriers blocking escape routes. Bodies of outlaws lay pinned or motionless amid the debris. Through the settling dust, Isaiah glimpsed Jeremiah McCrae, trapped beneath a massive slab of rock. The outlaw leader's lower body was crushed, blood pooling in the dirt. Coughing, Isaiah and Savannah ventured forward carefully. Jeremiah strained to lift the stone face contorted in agony. He glared at them, spitting blood as he tried to raise his revolver. His hands trembled violently, the life draining from him. "This ain't over," he growled, choking on his own blood. Isaiah knelt nearby. Gun pointed, Savannah hovered behind him, face pale. This was the man who had slaughtered her family, who had threatened them even now. Jeremiah's eyes flicked to the girl. You're the reason. I'm done. Should have killed you. With the rest, Savannah stared, tears streaming. She thought she'd feel triumph seeing him like this. But it was hollow. This man had stolen her world, and now the world was crushing him in return. A cosmic vengeance, or sheer coincidence. Hard karma hitting back. No matter what you called it, the outcome was the same. Isaiah glanced at her, waiting, the question unspoken. Do you want to end him? Savannah's hands trembled. She looked at Jeremiah's tortured expression, then at her pistol. A swirl of emotions, rage, sorrow, pity whirled within her. But in that moment she realized pulling the trigger again wouldn't bring her family back. Would it ease her pain or bury it deeper? She closed her eyes. He's already dying. Isaiah understood. He stood, holstered his gun, and walked away, leading Savannah with him. Jeremiah tried to scream curses, but coughed up blood instead. Seconds later, the dying man's choking subsided into silence. As the dust finally settled, the gorge lay eerily silent. No more gunfire, no more battle cries. Bodies of outlaws were scattered among the debris victims of their own cruelty and the unforgiving land. Hard karma had indeed demanded its toll. Isaiah and Savannah picked their way through the rubble. They managed to find Sable, who had bolted during the commotion, but thankfully wasn't injured. Outside the main cluster of fallen rock, a few outlaws lay unconscious or critically wounded. Some might live to face frontier justice, but many would not. Savannah paused at the edge of the devastation, tears streaking through the grime on her cheeks. Isaiah placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. She gazed up at him. "Is it?" He sighed. "That's what I used to think, too. Once the killers were dead, the nightmares would stop. But what we've done, it's necessary, yet it doesn't erase what you lost." She nodded, hugging her arms around herself. The land around them felt too big, too empty. But she was alive, and that meant something. Eventually, they left the gorge behind, riding slowly back to Willow Creek. The townsfolk reacted with shock and awe when Isaiah and Savannah relayed what had happened. Tobias the blacksmith quietly marveled at their survival. Laurel the saloon owner pressed her hand over her heart when she heard Jeremiah McCrae was gone. "Good riddance," she muttered, offering them free drinks to celebrate. They both declined. After a night's rest in Willow Creek, Isaiah and Savannah continued on their journey. They decided to return to Clay Gulch, where Mabel might help Savannah find a semblance of normalcy. The ride was long, and they spoke little. Savannah wrestled with grief and the violence she'd witnessed and taken part in. Isaiah tried to be a steady presence, offering what comfort he could. When they arrived at Clay Gulch, Mabel nearly knocked Savannah off her feet in a hug. She ushered them inside, fussing over them with motherly concern. "You both look half dead. Sit down. Let me get you something to eat." In the days that followed, Isaiah helped Savannah settle into a routine. The townsfolk, once they heard her story, pitched in donations of clothing, a few coins, and small gestures of kindness. Mabel offered her a place to stay at the boarding house. Savannah accepted with gratitude, though she still carried a haunted look in her eyes. Isaiah found himself torn. He had come to care for Savannah deeply, but the frontier was no place for a child with no kin. He had to decide if he should leave her here to be raised by a new community or try to find any surviving relatives back east. Savannah made the choice easier one evening as they sat on the porch, the setting sun painting the sky in gentle hues of orange and pink. "I want to stay here," she said softly, "with Mabel. These people, they're kind. They don't look at me with pity, at least not the bad kind. It's like they want me to heal." Isaiah nodded, throat tight. He'd grown fond of her, protective even, but he also knew that she deserved a stable life, and he wasn't sure he could provide that while wandering the dusty trails in search of odd jobs as a scout and tracker. He gently took her hand. "If that's what you want, I'll support you. Mabel is a good woman. She'll treat you like her own." Savannah's eyes glistened. "You won't stay?" Isaiah swallowed. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to make sure you're all right. But part of me knows I can't stop searching. Searching for what he cast his gaze toward the horizon, a way to live with what happened to my family. Maybe to do more good for folks out there who can't protect themselves. I don't know." She squeezed his hand. "You saved me, Isaiah. I'll never forget that." His chest tightened. "I did what any man with a conscience would." She shook her head softly. "Not everyone would." They watched the sun dip below the horizon, each lost in thought. For the first time in a long while, Isaiah felt a hint of peace. He had avenged Savannah's family, though it wouldn't mend her broken heart. But maybe this was a step toward his own redemption. Word spread quickly through the territory that the McCrae posse was finished. A few of the surviving members were brought to justice when they crawled out of Shadow Gorge. Battered and bleeding Clay Gulch's Marshal Jenkins even made a trip to confirm the rumor he thanked Isaiah personally, though Isaiah insisted he hadn't done it alone. Savannah began to help Mabel around the boarding house, serving meals, tidying rooms, and greeting weary travelers. The routine brought her some measure of solace. Though nights were still hard, Isaiah would find her sometimes on the porch, staring into the night sky, tears glimmering in her eyes. They'd talk, or sometimes just sit in silence, acknowledging the wounds that still bled in her heart. One day, a traveling preacher passed through, offering condolences and blessings. He had heard tales of a young girl orphaned by outlaws and wanted to help Savannah thanked him, but politely declined any further intervention. "I've made a home here," she said. "I have a future, somehow." The preacher nodded, respecting her resilience. Weeks turned into a month. The scar on Isaiah's arm had healed into a pink slash. The bullet wound on his shoulder still gave him occasional trouble, but he managed. He knew he was staying longer than he'd intended. There was comfort in Clay Gulch, a chance at a simpler life. But the dusty trails still called to him, a reminder that he had never truly stopped wandering since he lost his own family. One bright morning, he found Savannah at the boarding house, breakfast table, peeling apples with Mabel. The girl looked up, noticing the satchel slung over his shoulder. Her face fell. "You're leaving?" she asked. He nodded, forcing a reassuring smile. "Time for me to move on. There are folks out there who might need help, and I've never been good at sitting still." Savannah glanced at Mabel, who wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the kitchen to give them privacy. Savannah placed the knife down her fingers, trembling. "I'll miss you. A lot I'll miss you too, kid," Isaiah said, his voice catching. "But this place, it's good for you. And if you ever need me, you know, I'll come back." She rose, wrapped her arms around him, and pressed her cheek to his chest. He held her gently, fighting the surge of emotion. For a few moments neither spoke. It was a farewell steeped in gratitude and sadness, hope and unresolved pain. Finally he released her. "Take care of yourself. and look after Mabel. She's a good soul, but she won't say no to a little help." Savannah nodded, wiping tears. "You be careful out there." He promised he would, though the frontier didn't offer much in the way of safety. With a final glance at Mabel, who offered him a tearful smile, Isaiah stepped out onto the sun-baked street. Sable waited, saddled and ready. The town's dusty thoroughfare stretched out in both directions, a reminder of all the miles he had yet to roam. He mounted up, tipping his hat in a silent farewell to Savannah, who stood on the boarding-house porch, hands clasped in front of her. He clicked his tongue, and Sable trotted forward, carrying him away from the place he'd come to think of as a brief refuge. The bright sun of a new day warmed his back, and somewhere in the distance, the horizon beckoned. Savannah watched until Isaiah was only a speck on the horizon. A part of her wanted to run after him, to beg him to stay, but she knew he'd already given her a precious gift, a second chance. She also knew he was still a man haunted by his own ghosts, compelled to roam until he found closure or peace, or both. Life in clay. Gulch went on Savannah Rose, early baked bread, with Mabel served travelers, and slowly let the scars of her past begin to heal. The townsfolk treated her with a mix of sympathy and respect. She had survived unspeakable tragedy, and in the West, survival was something to be admired. Over time, she found she could laugh again, even if the laughter was sometimes tinged with bitter-sweet memory. She remembered her mother's songs and her father's steadfast courage. She recalled her siblings' playful banter. Their faces would never fade from her heart. But each passing day taught her a little more about living, despite the pain. Sometimes on the porch at night, she stared at the stars, wondering if Isaiah was doing the same somewhere on the trail. She hoped he'd found a little bit of peace, if only enough to keep him going. She pictured him guiding lost travelers, warning them of bandits, and maybe saving another life, as he'd saved hers. She whispered a silent prayer to the sky, not asking for anything, but offering thanks for survival, for kindness, for a chance at tomorrow. And so our story ends here on the dusty streets of Clay Gulch, where a grieving scout found the courage to protect the last survivor of a brutal wagon raid. Together they faced the savage fury of the McCrae posse, and hard karma served its final verdict in the unforgiving canyons of Shadow Gorge. While they parted ways under the setting sun, their bond would forever transcend the miles between them, a testament to the unyielding spirit of the Wild West and the glimmer of redemption that can spring from unimaginable loss. If you've been moved by this tale of courage, heartbreak, and the unwavering promise to stand against injustice, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends who love a gripping Wild West drama, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that ride the line between hope and despair. Grit and grace. Your support keeps these frontier legends alive. Thank you.